Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Julie's Orchids. We can see a very happy, comfortable little pup having a rest. Today, I'd like to talk about not Happy. We'll have a little look at Happy because she's getting ready to take a snooze. But what I wanted to talk to you today about, seaweed. So today I wanted to talk to you guys about seaweed. We're going to do an orchid chat and chores, and we're going to talk about seaweed. Specifically, I have been using the sea salt. You see right there. You can see I've been using it for a while. The bottle's almost empty. It's quite dirty. This had been my go-to product. And then I received in the mail some time back some free product samples from a company called Nutrog. And I've used the little bottles of calcium magnesium, I think it was, or fertilizer. But I haven't used their sea mungus yet. And this is their seaweed. So it's seaweed day today because I have a lot of things that are actively growing right now, and I just want to give them a little bit more of a bump up. Last watering day, we did calcium magnesium. So we're going to try the new product, Nutrog. Now, this is not a sponsored video. I received that product in the mail through my Orchid Society. Some representatives from Nutrog attended one of our visits, and we got to sign up, and everyone at the Orchid Society meeting got their little free samples. And we'll have a look at it today. So I'm going to go over how I use seaweed for my orchids, which is not necessarily according to the label of either one of these products. Again, I'm going to dive into the nerdy, sciencey part of orchid growing, and the part that I kind of like is the mixing of the fertilizers, the calcium, magnesium, and we get to use some little small sciencey equipment as in regards to a TDS meter. But yeah, it's been a while since we've gone over sort of how I fertilize or give nutrients. But today we're going to be very specifically talking about seaweed. Now, seaweed is a product that you do not give your orchids all year long. I don't fertilize all of my orchids all year long. The basic gist of it is if they're growing, they get fertilizer, calcium, magnesium, and seaweed on a cyclical basis. So one weekend of the month, they get fertilizer. One weekend of the month, they get calcium, magnesium. And then one weekend a month, they get seaweed. And then the next weekend, they get flushing with just plain reverse osmosis water. So we're going to be starting today with roughly 10 liters of reverse osmosis water. In a minute here, we'll swing on over and have a look at the sink in the bucket. We'll get the TDS meter out, and we'll attempt to let you guys see what my parts per million are in my water that I get from my reverse osmosis unit I installed a few years ago. Then we'll add the seaweed and we'll start watering some plants and have a little talk. Sounds good. Okay, so as you can see here in the kitchen, we've got my 10-liter bucket of reverse osmosis water. I have another 10-liter over there that I've already filled up. I use about 20 liters, sometimes a little bit more with watering of my plants, and because I live in an area of the world where water is not super abundant, I share my water among my orchids, which can sometimes be a dangerous thing to do, but most of my orchids have been in my collection long enough that I'm pretty sure I don't have any fusarium or anything like that. So we're going to start off with that 10 liters, that bucket, and the Simungus. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the phone down, move the tripod so we can get a look at what we're doing, and we'll be right back. All right, now, so quickly before we get going too much further, this is my TDS meter. You can see that there's a little bit on, but it's reading 0 parts per million because it's sitting in the cap. Now, what I've done here to show how important water quality is and to get to know your local water, I've poured a cup of just plain tap water from the sink, not through my RO unit system. And this is where we're going to see if we can actually see the readout on this while it's stuck in the plant. So bear with if it doesn't show up good. Let's put that down on in here, and we'll look at that, and we can see that straight out of the tap, with no filtration, I have 434 parts per million. Now, when it comes to providing nutrients, calcium, magnesium, fertilizer, seaweed, this is very important because I already have very hard water. And for some of my plants, particularly my phragmipediums and my slipper orchids, this water straight out of the tap is too much nutrients for those plants, full stop. And it'd be okay if I was only just watering everyday plants with these and my other non-frag or path orchids, but I don't know what's in this water. Now, I can tell you from the residue that is left on the showers, in the sinks, and anywhere that water is left to dry on, I think there's a pretty high calcium component, very high calcium component to this water. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's 434 parts per million. Now we'll pop over here to this bucket, and this bucket is 10 liters of water out of my RO unit. And we'll stick this right on in here. And we can see that I have about 12 parts per million. Now, why is it not zero? Okay, so it's not zero because this is RO water that has had all of the nasty stuff taken out of it, and then a little bit of the good stuff put back into it, because humans can't drink completely no nutrient, zero nutrient water. That's not healthy for them. And I do use my RO water for my coffee maker, if I'm boiling anything like spaghetti noodles or anything that needs to be boiled, or any cooking, and all of my drinking also comes out of the RO water. I don't drink my straight tap water. I wash with it, wash dishes, wash laundry, and take showers with it. But if it's going to be consumed or used with something that's consumed by anything human, animal, or plant, it's RO water here. Okay, so we know that the parts per million in this bucket is about 11, 12. And I'm going to use this product here to increase the parts per million. And I don't want it to be anything higher than 100. So not too much. And we're going to put some in, mix it around, test it, and get it to the level. Why do I want only like 100 and under parts per million of this product? Well, too much of a good thing can be too much of a good thing. And since these have a lot of the plant hormones and things, I don't want to just overdose the plants with them. They seem to be growing along happy with the amount of seaweed and frequency that I'm giving them. This is a new product. Like I said, I normally use sea salt. Again, not sponsored by this video. I got it because I belong to the Orchid Society of Western Australia, and we're going to just give it a try today. So the instructions on this bottle says give it a good shake. And then it does says that you're supposed to use 1 cupful to 2 liters of water. I'm not going to do that. We're going to go parts per million, and let's see what we can do. So I'm going to start with a capful of this stuff, and it really kind of doesn't look very appealing, but we'll start with a capful, and then we'll give it a mix around. And I can tell you right now that this seaweed smells more strongly than the sea salt. We'll just give that a bit of a mix around in here. And we'll turn our TDS meter back on. You can see it's reading nothing. And that's given me 21 parts per million. So maybe they're right on. I guess I could have just mixed up 2 liters to a capful to see what it was first. But I want a bit more than that. So that's 1 capful per 10 liters. And we'll do another cup full. And that's had a good mixing around. And that's taken us up to 45, so that's 2 per 10. This is getting interesting. And let's do another one. And that's taken me up to 70. I'm going to do one more cupful, and I think that'll get us right where we need. So this is 4 cupfuls per 10 liters of RO water, starting at 11 to 12 parts per million. And I don't want that to leak on my counter because I spilled some down the side of the bottle, so I put the bottle in the sink. And one last go at it. And that's taken me to 90. That's right where I want it. So with this mixture here, I'm going to water my large Phalaenopsis hybrids. And then we'll bring in other plants that aren't going to get as much, and we're going to slowly dilute this down. And that's what our Orchid Chat and Chores is going to do today. I also wanted to address, I had a viewer, The Wealth of Nations, asked me a question about an old video that I made when I went hiking in the Toolbrunup areas of Western Australia. And I kind of wanted to talk to him about that because Wealth of Nations asked me how I first came to be aware of Western Australian orchids. I'll stick his comment above in the corner up here. And we'll kind of talk about that because that'd be an interesting little story to talk about while we're watering the plants. So let's go get our first cartload of phals and get them something to drink. So as you can see, we've got the handy dandy little cart there. I found that this really does save me a lot of time in taking the plants from their spots on the shelves to the watering area in the sink in the kitchen. And so what I do is I just fill them up. You know, the other tray I was using, I could carry like 3 of the big phals. This one I can carry up to 5. And 5 is the amount that fits in the bucket well. So I just kind of grab them, stick them here. But we can see that all of these have got new growths coming on them. Very nice new growths, and that makes me quite happy. And these things are ready and ripe and willing to get some calcium and magnesium. I'm sorry, some seaweed today. So I'm going to bring the camera in a little bit closer so you can see what we're doing. But yeah, the basic concept is that we're putting the plants in for a little drink. Now, as you can tell, that water doesn't look very appealing. It's not a pretty color of water at all. And it smells a little bit fishy, a little bit like you're at the ocean when there's seaweed around, which I guess you'd expect that. So I just pour the water over the roots. You can see they're starting to turn green. We've got some new root growing here, and I'm just being very careful not to get any water in the crown or in the leaf joints. So no water here, and avoid getting water there. The aerial roots are finally getting long enough to dangle down into the water while they're sitting here, and that's fabulous. Now I've got good roots down into all of these pots, so these are just going to sit here for like 10 minutes or so while I'm doing other house chores so that they can really soak up a good amount of this nutrients that I'm giving it, the seaweed. Yeah, it's a bright sunny morning here in Perth this morning. It's not gotten too very hot yet. I can hear that my neighbor is out and about doing some yard work. So if you hear something that sounds like a hose squirting water, that's my neighbor Marie next door. And again, like I said, I'm just pouring the water around the edges of the substrate because some of the roots are grown onto the sides of the pot. And I'm just making sure that everything is going to get a good wetting and the ability to sit in this nutrient solution for, 10 minutes or so it can soak up those nice hormones and things. This is usually what I do of a Saturday morning. I intermingle watering the plants with my normal house chores, and it makes for a nice Saturday with the orchids. Alrighty, well that's that for this lot. They're going to sit there and soak up that nutrients. I'm going to go do a little bit of laundry, and we'll be back. All right, well this beautiful plant you see sitting in the seaweed is a species. This is species Phalaenopsis schilleriana. I feel kind of awkward doing this episode considering my good friend Nina over at Ninja Orchids has just released a very similar episode. Complete coincidence there. But it was really nice to watch her video this morning coming up to mine, because I was for a while there when this leaf was growing, just giving this plant like almost 200, 250 parts per million of seaweed. And in Nina's episode today, I'll try to put a link up there. She did mention some signs that you were giving too much seaweed. And I want to confirm, in fact, that what Nina said is also duplicated over here. So in Spain and in Perth, Australia, too much seaweed causes weirdness on the leaves. So I'm just going to turn and have a look here. Just look at how big and beautiful and nicely formed this leaf is. And we'll turn here and have a look at how weird and kind of crinkly and skinny and wonky looking this here leaf is. There's no pest damage on it. I've looked, absolutely none. But it wrinkled up like this. Now, when it started doing that, I thought, oh, I've got thrips or I've got something going on. So I gave it a really good treatment with pyrethrin spray. And then the next few days later, I gave it some garlic alcohol. And I thought, oh yeah, I've got it done. And the rest of that started growing up to here. But during this period of growth, like I said, I was blasting these with way too much seaweed. I was pretty well blasting them with a lot of everything, thinking it's an active growth. This is a species. I really want another one of these beautiful leaves right here, maybe get some good flower spikes, and too much of a good thing sometimes is just too much of a good thing. So when you use your seaweed, only when we're in growth. We've got a new leaf coming here. So this year I've grown 2 and now 3 leaves. It consumed the bottom 2 leaves, which is why I just decided to blast it with a lot of nutrients, fertilizer and seaweed and calcium, magnesium. And I did too much on the seaweed. And Nina's video this morning confirmed it for me. So thank you very much, Nina. And again, guys, seaweed is a good thing, but too much of it, these are hormones. So if you get too much of it, it's going to confuse the plant as well. So keep your parts per millions rather low on the seaweed and only in active growth. So we'll get this one a watering, and we'll kind of discuss, like I said, the wealth of nations. Wanted to know how I first came into knowledge of Western Australian orchids. Well, you can tell by listening to me that I'm not Australian. I don't have an Australian accent. I'm an American. In 2013, my daughter and I migrated here to Perth, Western Australia for work. Since that time, we have absolutely fallen in love with Western Australia, the people, the climate, the flora, the fauna, and decided that we would make this our forever home. And we proceeded to go for permanent residency and then citizenship. So we've done that. Now, how does that relate to getting to know about Western Australian orchids? Well, living over in East Central Illinois, I had never ever heard of them. However, when you move to Western Australia, you really can't not hear about them. So like I said, my daughter and I moved here in June of 2013. We spent the first few months just sort of getting settled, was a little bit afraid to get out into the bush and do much bushwalking. But we finally got, after about 5 months of being here, the nerve up to go do some hiking trails and whatnot through some of the local national parks. And very fortunate for Perth and Western Australia, there's a lot of lovely national parks within a short drive of where I'm at. And I believe that Alex and I went over to, I think it was John Forest National Park. And there was a group of people that were there looking for orchids. And orchid people are obviously very lovely. And that was our first introduction to them. Did we see any on our little hike there? No, we kind of just listened to the people and they went on their way and we went on ours. But when we did get back to the house, we just had a quick Google of them and saw that they were quite unusual looking plants. And, that was in 2013, and then pretty well didn't do much with anything orchid related or Western Australian orchid related. And that came later. Really, my good introduction to Western Australian orchids initially came through that nature hike. And when Alex and I were out at different national parks, some of them actually have areas where they point out, this is an area where this orchid grows. So we did see a few of those. I think one was down in Serpentine area. There's a little park down there. And when I started growing orchids, I was very fortunate that some of my friends also grew orchids, and they knew people that were really into orchids. And that's kind of how I got to know them. One of our Orchid Society of Western Australian members is also a Native Australian Orchid Society member, and he has some Native Australian orchids that he's purchased or obtained legally, because you can sometimes get them legally, that first gave me my first Western Australian orchid, and that was for my 50th birthday. And since then, I have killed the one he gave me because they're very special and difficult plants to grow, particularly indoors, because they require, the mycorrhizal fungi that you just don't get well in pots. So I did purchase a Western Australian native primary hybrid. I'm not going to show that plant because it is still in dormancy and it's basically just a pot full of dirt. But it's got a special piece of cloth in there that's been impregnated with those fungi. And it says that when you repot it, that you have to make sure that you take that cloth when you put it into the next pot. I've had it for a couple of years now, and I'm actually quite terrified to repot it, and I'm trying to learn a little bit about that. So this year it will have to be repotted. So I'm going to do a video on that. But just know right off the bat that I'm quite intimidated to do that. I'm afraid I'll lose it. So now this little group of phals are going to sit and soak for the next 10 minutes or so, and we'll be back in a minute. Alrighty, so these guys had their 10 minutes to shine in the sun, if you will, and we're just going to show you how it's pretty easy to get water accidentally into the crowns of your orchids when you pull them out of a watering system like this, which is why I don't completely fill my bucket with plants. I've lost some plants because of splashback. So we'll just kind of pull them up out of the water a little bit, let it drain out. Don't pull them all the way up quickly because it does get good water drainage and the water splashes. So I hold it just a little bit above the plant level until it quits running full. And then it's going to sit on the side of the sink so that it can finish draining what little bits of water might be stuck in there. I know this isn't real exciting, but this is the reality of the orchid hobby. Again, you saw how much came flushing out of that pot, so you just kind of have to be a little bit cognizant and gentle when lifting your pots out. And you can see this one's got beautiful roots all the way down there to the bottom of the pot. This is a new arrival from Lynn Brooks. We've got a really nice leaf growing here. And I absolutely love this one because this one is Yapon Black Snake by Llewellyn Bluebird by Dark Blue Flat. And it's got the name Bluebird in it. And those of you that know me know that my nickname is Bluebird. And this is a pitiful looking little species, not Phalaenopsis aphrodite. This is Phalaenopsis equestris variety leucapsis. However, because it was given to me wrongly tagged, it's now an OIB. This one got the spider mites. This one I'm worried about. And yeah, you guys, cross your fingers for this one because it got pretty well decimated by the spider mites, and it hasn't done any growing since then, except for this one leaf, and I'm a bit worried about it. And last but not least, the species Phal Stewartiana variety Tipo. This one was doing really good, and then it bloomed, and now it's just kind of I'm unsure as what's going on with it. It's got roots down into the pot. The roots are turning green, so they're taking up nutrients. This one's dying, but that's okay. So I'm quite unsure what's going on with this one. It might be a goner. It just isn't doing anything. So we're just going to go ahead and quickly finish off my big phals. And then I'm not going to use this high of a concentration parts per million of seaweed on my smaller phals, you know, my babies and my seedling phals, mostly because it's just too much for them. So we're going to stop watering phals, and I'm going to go pick up some of the oncidiums for the next load. And we're going to give, you know, the bigger plants are the ones that are getting this strong of seaweed. And then as the water gets used up by the plants, we'll just add more fresh RO water. We may have to tweak by adding a little bit more seaweed here or there, but we're just going to let this naturally, if you will, dilute through the process of the use of the water that's happening here. Like I said, on average, to water all of my plants in this style where we share water, I usually use around 20, maybe 25 liters of RO water a watering session, and those happen every Saturday. And again, here you can see this funky leaf here. Let's zoom in on it. This funky leaf here, this is not too much seaweed. This is spider mite damage. You can see underneath there, that's what happened to this leaf. So yeah, that's why I said I was really happy to hear from Nina that my thoughts that it was too much seaweed caused that Phal Schilleriana to have that funky leaf. Her video today confirmed my suspicions, because on that plant you can lift the leaf and it's clean underneath, whereas this one you lift the leaf and you can see all that damage underneath versus the healthy underside of a leaf, what it's supposed to look like. All right, so these ones are going to soak for about 10 minutes. I'm going to put the other plants that are draining back on the shelves, and we'll go grab some of the oncidium types, specifically the brassias, because Brassia Shelob okika has opened all of her flowers on her flower spike and is just absolutely looking darling. So let's go get that one and have a look. Okay guys, so this is Brassia Shelob okika, and she has opened up that flower spike, and it's just looking absolutely stunning. That flower there is a little bit wonky. I think Happy got a hold of it. This one is sitting on the floor in the grow room, And you can see there's some nice happy sap going on right here. This plant is just beyond happy, and a little bit damaged by a little dog named Happy. But that's okay because flowers are there to enjoy. The two-legged and the four-legged variety of people in this house get to enjoy the pretty flowers, the pretty fragrances, and that's just a lovely flower. All right, well, that's about it for today, guys. I'd like to thank you so much for watching. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. A subscribe would be great. And enjoy your day.